So as you can tell, this is a fascinating true story told in a very unorthodox, cool manner. It has an amazing cast led by our guest tonight. Let's give it up for one of the finest actors working today, Mr. Peter Sarsgaard. Congratulations on the film again, man. This is a great piece of work.
Thanks a lot.
So let's talk a little bit about, I think they got a sense from the trailer about a little bit of Stanley Milgram. How much do you think the audience needs to know, should know going into this?
I mean, every movie, I think the least you know, the better.
We should just leave. We should just get off the set.
Yeah, drop the mic. You know, I guess from the trailer, you know that the shocks are not real. So the basis for his most famous experiment, which was about blind obedience to malevolent authority, was there's only one person in that room that is not part of the experiment. It's the person that thinks that they're shocking someone in another room when they get a wrong answer. And the shocks go from mild to XXX danger. And the yelling in the other room is all pre-recorded. And the guy in the other room is frankly just sitting there reading a book or something like that. The doctor who's in the room is also an actor. And sometimes the person giving the shocks, you know, starts to get uncomfortable because what they're doing is sadistic. And, you know, they'd say, please, I have to stop. And the doctor would usually just say, the experiment requires that you continue. And they would disregard their own feelings of what's right and wrong, abdicate responsibility, say things like, this is on you. You know, I'm going to keep doing it, but it's your responsibility. And Stanley Milgram grew up in the Bronx in the 40s, Jewish, parents from Eastern Europe. The influences for why he came up with this experiment are fairly obvious, which had a lot to do with the Holocaust, trying to understand how an entire country followed one person. Obviously, not everyone in Germany was wanting to kill Jewish people. So I think that's probably the basis of the experiment, but he rarely talked about that.
Would you have been as interested in this subject matter if it were done in somewhat of a more conventional biopic manner? How much of the fact that the approach to this is the selling point for you?
The approach is everything for me. I mean, we shot the film in 20 days. I don't like biopics. Pretty strictly speaking. I'd rather read a book about the person's life and get all of the details. But this book, or this movie, operates kind of like a box of mirrors. You have to think about this most famous experiment. Now, he had a number, like 6 degrees of separation, which we all know is from Stanley Milgram as well. But it's a movie about the various levels of what reality is. And I would say, actually, even venture to say that social psychology is a venture into trying to understand what reality is. What is the reality between you and I right now? What is the reality of this entire room? What is really going on with all of us as individuals and as a collective unit? And so the person who thinks they're giving shocks has one reality. The doctor, the guy playing the doctor and the guy playing the person getting shocked have another reality. Stanley Milgram on the other side of a two-way mirror has another reality. There's a movie within the movie in this where an actor named Keelan Lutz from the Twilight series is playing
William Shatner, right?
William Shatner in a movie about Stanley Milgram. And I'm complaining that he's not Jewish and he's playing me. And of course, I'm not Jewish and I'm playing Stanley Milgram. So this movie has all these various levels of reality. And I would even venture to say that the candid reality that we're used to kind of loving from actors where they don't know the camera's on them, behavior is being revealed that's not intentional, that sort of lack of intentionality. And we go, oh, he's not telling me this, I'm just learning this by watching him, is something we dip our toe in and also then abandon. I talk directly to the camera at times because that's actually a kind of modern idea about what reality is. You see that there's a Gary Winogrand photograph in this. Gary Winogrand, Lee Friedlander, all of those sort of, snapshot Leica photographers from the 60s and 70s were trying to capture a candid reality. Marlon Brando was acting, a certain kind of candid acting where we feel like we're spying on him, which has become very popular. So as an actor, I got interested in all these different levels of reality going on and not being asked to do the thing where it's like it's Christmas and my mom's dying of cancer and you get to see how I'm upset and not upset and all this sort of, melodrama stuff I'm normally asked to play.
How much of that how much of the interest in that kind of thing, in this kind of form that's breaking the form in many ways, comes from having done it a while and done, your share of different kinds of films at different degrees of conventionality? I guess I'm asking, is the subject matter, is the approach to this film something that inherently you always were interested in, or does it come after doing this for, a couple decades in, like it needs to intrigue you on another level?
Yeah, when I first started acting, I wanted to be, Sean Penn. I wanted to be Marlon Brando. It's like my heroes of acting all do that kind of acting where I'm talking about where you feel like you're spying on them in their behavior. You glean things from them that you don't think they're necessarily projecting directly at you. It's it's my favorite kind of acting. But yeah, I don't think I would have done this straight out of the gate. I mean, I'm acting with an elephant in this. I sing from South Pacific, Some Enchanted Evening, which I'm not going to do for you tonight.
But we will bring out the elephant. The elephant will come.
We'll bring out the elephant later. There was a real elephant. I acted with an elephant in this movie.
Why was the elephant there, and does it matter to you at all?
Well, I mean, the elephant in the room is clearly the Holocaust, but it's also the obvious thing that we all choose to ignore. That kind of thing, whether from cognitive dissonance, because it would just blow our lives apart if we actually sat down and went like, oh my God, this is completely messed up that we're doing this. Or for some other reason, that sort of, that thing that is so completely obvious that it's easy to ignore.
You mentioned breaking the fourth wall. When you're doing that, who do you imagine you're talking to? Are you thinking about that? And is there a certain, expertise, or what are you bringing to that that's different than the rest of your work in the film?
I did it differently than I have before. I've actually talked into camera. I can immediately think of in one other movie. In The Dying Gaul, I talked into camera. But in that, I was talking to my dead lover who was in the camera. In this, Stanley did a lot of his own films. And I was greatly influenced by that. He would have this kind of forced casual style where he'd be sitting in a restaurant and the camera would come in and he would pretend for some reason to drink from a glass of wine. It was clear he was not drinking from it, and he'd put it down. And then he'd begin talking about this very serious subject. But he would try to do it in a way that was clear, as if he was talking to someone who wasn't quite as smart as he was. And that interested me. I rarely get interested in the real person. I don't care if they're real or not real. In this specific instance, because of these various levels of fiction that I'm talking about, my beard in the movie should have its own movie.
It's haunting.
It's haunting. And actually, when my beard first gets introduced, I'm talking to an Abraham Lincoln impersonator who has the same beard. And I'm asking him if his accent is real and stuff like that, So, yeah, I guess I was, in some ways, talking to Stanley Milgram, But I also felt like I was a teacher. There was information that can be... It's not too difficult to understand, but I'm trying to communicate information, which is a different task than I'm normally given.
I'm always curious, all the issues that a film like this brings up, as actors on set and working with a filmmaker, when it comes time to be on set, this is a 20-day shoot, as you said, this is very quick. Do you have time to kind of dig into kind of the broader implications of the subjects you're dealing with? Like, when you're on set, is it just about getting the work in, or are you having kind of deeper...
Movie like this, I'm just like, I'm just going every single scene. I would shoot like 12 pages in a day. That's a lot. And just even in terms of memorization, talking about things like the agentic state, which is an interesting concept, but I have to use the language that he would use, understand the terms that he uses, even just to wrap my head around the ideas to understand them for myself took time.
Is that a necessary thing that you actually have to, I mean, this sounds like a stupid question, but I'm kind of serious. Do you actually have to know what you're talking about to deliver, you know what I mean, to deliver a speech like that? Or is it just in the manner that you deliver it that you can sell it?
Well, if I don't understand it, you're certainly not going to understand it. I don't know if you've ever had a teacher who didn't understand what they were saying, but it's very difficult to follow them. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about the filmmaker behind this. As we said before, is using some interesting tricks in terms of breaking the fourth wall. Rear projection is used. I don't know if you guys know what that refers to, but basically, like it's like when you saw in old time movies, you know, driving in a car, you'd see kind of like literally a something projected in the background.
And less common the way we use it, which is like the entire room that we're in is projected on the wall with maybe a chair or two, and then the chair we're sitting on to match.
So is that distracting on set, or is that like, oh, this is, again, I've never done this before, this is exciting, or is that conducive or helpful or what to the process for you?
I mean, it takes you out of a kind of literal reality, puts you in a different place. It's more like theater. Yeah, I mean, we did that for a number of reasons. One is that we shot it all in the Pfizer plant in Brooklyn, where they used to make Viagra. Now they make kimchi, I think. But
same difference.
Yeah, no, maybe there's Viagra in the kimchi. I would be careful when consuming kimchi from Brooklyn. But it was part of the speed of making this. We would just throw another slide up on the wall. We're in a different place. I'd change outfits, and it's a different scene. And it's kind of amazing when you go to watch the movie that it works. In reality, I was unsure whether or not this would work.
Where is Milgram standing in like the psychological community today? Like, is he revered? Are there still questions about his methods today?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not even whether or not his methods were okay. It's that experiment in particular, the obedience to authority experiment, made it difficult for other social psychologists to do the experiments that they wanted to do because of the kind of public reaction to it. So I think a lot of social psychologists today go like, he set us back a little bit because he jumped the gun. The information is valuable. I don't think anyone has a problem with that. It's just this idea that these people were lied to about what the experience was. They had the traumatic event of thinking they were shocking someone else, hurting them, and then told it was all okay. But of course now we live in a world that I think is much different. We have shows like Punk'd, where half the people on that show were being tortured, if you really look at it.
What kind of questions does going through a process like this, discussing something like this for months on end, raise within you about obedience, about authority? What are the issues you're still tackling with that you're wrestling with to this day, you think?
Well, this thing of the agentic state, I mean, I think we could probably even see in this room right now. It's the idea that I was just following orders, or it's store policy. That's a good one. It's store policy. Like, I bought a toy for my daughter not long ago at a toy store, and I walked like the 20 feet out of the store. I gave it to her. It's broken. And I went, oh, well, go get you a new one. I go back into the store, and the lady asked me for a receipt. I'm digging around. I'm like, I lost the receipt in 20 feet. I'm sorry. She said, well, you need a receipt. And I was like, yeah, no, but I just bought it from you. Like, you know me, right? You saw me buy it. So it's me. No, I need a receipt. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's store policy. That idea that we'll just get rid of logic. We'll get rid of our own feelings, our own identity about what is right or wrong in the given situation. What's right is that I bought something from you and it's broken and you should take it back. Store policy, what the is that? I mean, so anyway, what I did, which is illegal, is when she wasn't looking, I put the broken toy back and I grabbed the toy that was not broken and I gave it to my crying daughter and everything was fine. The truth is I probably could have got arrested, and the fact that I did it in front of my child, the child services could have come in, and God knows what could have happened. But that idea of just following orders, it happens in the military, it happens in hospitals, it happens constantly, and it drives most of us crazy.
how were you raised in regards to like questioning authority? Were you the kind of kid that naturally did that? Were you an anti-authoritarian kid from the start? Did you follow orders? How would you describe yourself?
Well, I'm an only child who grew up in. I went to 12 different schools, and all the way up through high school. I lived in Southern Illinois, Missouri, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Connecticut. So I always felt out of place. And also being an only child who was allowed to do whatever he wanted, I didn't even have a concept of authority. So whenever I ran up against it, I found it shocking and appalling, and I would find a way to weasel my way through it and get what I wanted. Not typically at the expense of other people, but just what felt right to me. Yeah.
I'm curious about authority on a film set too, where like what the situations where I'm sure you've had all sorts of situations on a film set where you have that startling realization that maybe the director doesn't know what they're doing or you don't agree with what they're doing. Hopefully that's a rare circumstance, but how do you how do you negotiate that when you're supposed to be looking to this man or woman and then you realize you can't count on them?
Well, you do films for a variety of reasons. I've gone into films knowing I was going to be in that situation, but you're doing films for, many reasons. Sometimes you do films to remind people that Peter Sarsgaard's an actor, and it's going to be on 3,500 screens. And you can do a decent job, and you don't need the help of the director. So if they offer it, I politely refuse it. Other times it's a collaboration. It really depends, but I look for help. I accept help. I like collaborating. I would say it happens 50% of the time. But, as an actor, everyone's got this sort of idea that you're a lot of the times like a kind of idiot savant. And if you can use that to your advantage where you go like, they tell you something and you look like you're really trying to understand. And then when the camera rolls, it's like you're so in the world of it that you've forgotten. And then they come back and they tell you again and you go, right. And you sort of encourage this idea that you're not a thinking person, but you're more like a dog,
Michael was somebody that, this is the first time you've worked together, yes? How did he approach you with this project? As I understand it, he was, from what I read, he was sending you material that wasn't necessarily the script at first. Is that true? Did it start with the script, or was it?
Started with material.
So that's that's an odd circumstance, I would say, right?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the material was fascinating. I read several books about him. He filmed, I think one of the reasons he's become so significant in popular culture is he filmed the last 2 days of the obedience to authority experiments. These were experiments that went on for several years. So just the last little bit of it was filmed. And to watch that is incredibly helpful as an actor, to just see the actual behavior. And what you see with these people is 65% of the people went all the way and gave someone what they thought potentially could be a dangerous dose of electricity. Said XXX danger. They had been screaming, they had stopped screaming, and none of them did it gleefully. That makes me happy. No one laid on the most intense switch and went how's that? Some of them were weeping. Many of them were really uncomfortable. Like I said, abdicating responsibility. To me, that makes me happy,
Have you watched your own work in this? Are you one of those actors that hates to watch himself, or are you okay? Can you be self-analytical?
I go see my movies if I personally would go see that movie. I don't go see it just because I'm in the movie.
Right.
I saw this movie.
That's all you need to know.
Yeah.
I'm curious, what percentage of the time are you hard on yourself? Are you hard on the films you're in? You're obviously very proud of this one. You've been talking a lot about this one. How often, frankly, does that happen? It's always a...
Well, you talk about movies for a variety of reasons, and I think one of the things about this film is I think this is something everybody needs to think about. In what ways do we not follow our own instincts about what's right and wrong and just go oh, well, I guess they said it, so I'm going to do it. Even if you go that's messed up, but you still do it. It's scary to stand up. But, you're asking what percentage of the time? Oh, God. I maybe 30% of the movies I do. That's pretty good in
for
most
a
people's
working actor?
jobs. Yeah, I think that's really good.
Luckily, this is part of the 30%. Let's take a look at a clip from Experimenter.
It's funny, I keep saying I just realized I keep talking about the movie as being like a box of mirrors, like what is the reality and everything's reflecting. Then, of course, there you go, box
The
of
mirror.
mirrors. Yeah.
The woman that Winona is playing, Stanley's wife, she's around, and you talked to her.
She's
yes?
not only around, she's in the movie. Yeah. I actually acted a scene with her where she called me Stanley and I called her Sasha. And we acted the scene as husband and wife. A portion of it made into the movie, but it was really fascinating to do. His brother is in the movie. Yeah, we're kind of mixing things here. It's great.
Let me guess, you're a Charlie Kaufman fan as well.
Most of the time.
Is that odd? I mean, this sounds like the kind of film where you don't, and most people, 99% of the population rather, probably have heard of maybe Stanley's name, but don't know what he looks like, et cetera. So you don't necessarily have to do an impression, an imitation, but you do have family literally in the movie on set. Is that something to negotiate as an actor? You've played real people before. Like, where do you stand on sort of like how slavishly you have to, go to the letter of the law of their life?
I only really worry about that if I'm playing someone like Bobby Kennedy, and I won't play Bobby Kennedy because it's incredibly difficult. If you go to play someone that famous who had that that specific kind of voice and style, you're spending all your time on the surface, and it's incredibly difficult. I played Stanley when it suited me to play Stanley. Otherwise, I was whatever I was, I mix things if they're helpful.
Let's open this up to this wonderful audience. Some questions from you guys for Mr. Sarsgaard.
Peter, hearing you speak here, I'm expecting to see you in some more comedies. You've not done a lot of comedies, but you've done some very important films, and it's ironic that, or maybe not ironic, that you were also in Kinsey. So here you are dealing with two people that have dealt with situations that have had huge psychological impacts on our culture. Do you feel that puts an extra burden on your shoulders, and then you need to then do that comedy because you've done that?
I mean, God, to me, the thing is, so comedy is, at its greatest, to me, what everybody wants to do. Unfortunately, with comedy, it's also what sells best in our culture. So people cheapen it quite easily to try to get the most money. So most comedies that you read pander to the most people because it's very easy to do. You want to get your movie on 3,500 screens. I'm more interested in material that's not trying to get the biggest audience. That's just trying to express something that's true to itself. It's very hard to find a comedy like that. But yeah, I've been developing a comedy about mental health in the United States, which I think is hilarious, especially if you walk around and saw this guy today, homeless guy who was clearly mentally ill, take off all of his clothes down to his underwear and start cleaning someone's windshield with his clothes. And, you just go like, it's so depressing that it's hilarious. Yeah, I mean, I think I felt the need to develop my own material in that department. And a lot of, you look at a lot of the great comedies that come around and the lead actor in it is the one that's responsible for the material. And because I'm not by trade a comedian, it's more difficult for me. You rarely get handed like the script that's just floating around that's got great comedic material.
Hi, I just got here and didn't even realize that you were speaking here today, so it's a great surprise. I just want to start off with that. I don't know how to say this without sounding cliche, but what kind of starting words would you give to an actor who's kind of just getting in there and starting out? Like, I'll refine it. What would you...
I can answer that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like process or something like that?
Well, getting started, I would say if you don't write, find a writer, collaborate with them, and make your own material. It's easy enough to grab one of these cameras in here and film it, and then some of this software and edit it, and get it out there in whatever way. Create something yourself, because Hollywood's not doing it. And, like I said, and there's a lot of great young writers out there that can't get their material done, and actors that are sitting on their hands. I don't really understand why they don't get together. It's very easy to make your own films. That's what you want to do. Yeah.
Hi, Peter. You've been in a lot of good movies. I was wondering how you get to the movies, how these movies are offered to you, because you've been in a lot of movies. You've been in Shattered Glass, Blue Jasmine, Black Mass, and you were just in that NBC show, The Slap, which was really good. I'm just wondering, and you're also going to be in The Magnificent Seven. How do these roles come to you? Do you ask for them? Are you handed scripts? Just the whole process of getting the script and learning the role you will be playing.
Well, it's changed over time, right? So when I first started acting, it was actually in some ways better, because I would meet with a director. I have an agent, and I would get set up with a meeting, and I'd read for them, and if we collaborated well, I'd end up with the role. Now I don't meet with them. Now I get sent roles, and it's like a blind date. And a lot of the time, they don't even really, they don't think that you want to meet with them before you sign up to the movie. And they're actually surprised when I say, well, why don't we meet first? Oh, but you've been offered the role. I'm like, yeah, but we should kiss before we have sex. You know what I mean? And so I know a lot of young actors go like, oh, I can't wait to the place when things are just offered to me. The more powerful you get, you can actually get into a position where you could play parts that are not right for you just because you're financing their movie. They go like, oh, he could play the whale. And I'm like, not so much. So.
Hello, Peter. Thanks for being here. One of the most interesting insights I'd heard into acting ever came from you a few years back, and I've told this story so many times. It was about Blue Jasmine, and you were talking about how Woody Allen gives pages to actors of the script of only the scenes that they're in. And because of Cate Blanchett's incredible performance, and because you absolutely had no context into her character, you thought that perhaps she may have been having a nervous breakdown in real life in certain scenes. And it fascinated me. How do you approach a scene in which you have no real context other than the immediacy of that scene?
It's really hard. I mean, I couldn't understand how I was proposing marriage to her when we had no real scenes of us falling in love, but I normally would not be interested in doing that, because to me it's a way of disempowering an actor. But, with Woody Allen, you just sort of go like, he's made some good movies. I think we'll just roll the dice and see. And I did think she was having a very hard time. I thought she was, I kept kind of going like, he would go away and I go, you're really good. Don't worry, you're so good. It's going to be okay. I don't care what he says. What a jerk. So.
I just had a question in regards to this famous experiment. If you personally, how you feel about the ethics of what was going on, and if you had preconceived notions going into it, and if that changed through the course of the process.
Yeah, I guess I think it was different in the early 60s when this experiment was done. Coming out of the 50s, which to me, I didn't live in the 50s, I'm born in 1971, but my idea of the 50s was it was a time where people were not investigating with real vigor the dark sides of their lives. That I imagine it more like, like what you see in movies where everyone's got their shirt tucked in and the lawn is mowed. So I think that it felt rough. It felt like we don't want to know these things about ourselves. Now I feel like we live in a world where people go like, it's okay to know everything that I'm capable of. It doesn't make me a bad person to know that I'm capable of doing bad things. That's actually good information. Wouldn't you rather know that you have it in you to do this? Isn't that the way that we actually solve problems, by knowing that we have them in the first place? Now, in terms of the ethics of doing it, he couldn't have done the experiment if he had said, these shocks aren't real. We're going to pretend that you're shocking someone else in the other room, and hopefully we'll learn something. I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. However, when I talked to social psychologists today, a lot of them say that this particular experiment set them back for a period of time just because of the public reaction to it and made it more difficult to do other experiments for a certain period of time. But we live in a much different world now. Actually, there was a program in France called Le Jeu de Mort, the Game of Death, where they did this to an unsuspecting person in front of a live studio audience that was egging them on, that knew that it wasn't real, but the person up there thought it was, and the audience was like going, come on, you know. So it's a rougher world now, in my opinion, but that could also be because I didn't live in the 50s, you know.
Hi there. I was wondering if any of the original subjects of the experiment were involved in the movie at all, either with like consulting or actually appeared in the film.
Yeah, actually, there were several people who were either students or involved in the original experiments that were in the film. One interesting thing about the movie is almost none of it is made up. Michael had this real clear idea that we would take either things that were in the written record or things that his wife said, his brother said, the test subject said actually happened, have them try to remember them as they actually happened, and then we would repeat them and fit them into this kind of, you know, this, you haven't seen it, but this film is not structured like an ordinary film. It is not boring, but it is not a story arc that keeps you involved. So it could handle like a kind of tangent into some story that Sasha told us happened. And at times I would say, this dialogue feels really weird to me. And he'd go like, actually, there's a video of them saying it. And that's what was, and not a video, a film, because he shot a lot of films. This is what was said. Saying, oh, great. Well, just because it was actually said doesn't mean it should be said in the movie, you know, but that's shooting it in 20 days, using only, you know, like original dialogue is kind of, you know, that Lars von Trier idea of like having a bunch of obstructions, you know, that interesting things are made by tying your hands behind your back.
Thank you for such a brilliant career so far, and best of luck and stuff for the future. When playing such an iconic guy like this, he had the 6 degrees of separation. Do you find it challenging at moments when you are portraying someone that is as noticeable in the public eye?
Yeah, I don't like it. You know, I don't like playing real people, strictly speaking, and especially don't like playing famous real people. But I have 3 movies out right now, and I play real people in all 3 of them. This is more has to do with what Hollywood is interested in than what I'm interested in. I tend to cut myself a break and not worry about it too much, you know. There was one scene that I did with an actor playing Dick Cavett in it. I felt really sorry for him because, I mean, how the hell do you play Dick Cavett? I mean, he's Dick Cavett. And plus, even for me, when I was in that scene with him, because that interview is very famous, that was my least favorite scene to do because, you know, his behavior is quite interesting in the interview. Dick Cavett is really going at him about the ethics of what he did. He's quite defensive. He's sitting there in a certain way, and you know, you think like, do I have to imitate that behavior? I don't really want to do that. I usually don't worry about it. I just go like, somebody can go watch the original Dick Cavett thing if they want to. You know, I recommend it.
We should say that Experimenter opens tomorrow. It is also going to be available on VOD, and for you Apple enthusiasts, it will be on iTunes. We should thank Mr. Peter Sarsgaard for this exceptional piece of work, operating at well above 30% in his career. Peter Sarsgaard, give it up.
Thanks, everybody.